Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm honored to introduce you all to Masonic and Satanic ritual abuse, MK Ultra and child trafficking survivor, overcomer and whistleblower, qualified survival instructor, instructor for hostile environment awareness training, alpine climber, Tibetan medicine practitioner, adventure sports instructor, outdoor lover, and all-around badass and inspiration. Lou. Lou was born into a multi-generational incest-based bloodline family and is a survivor of the highest levels of Masonic and Satanic ritual abuse and mind control, and was the daughter of a channeler and healer mother and a father who was a former merchant navy, worked at Shirley Oaks Children's Home as a maintenance worker and builder, and who was a former model with celebrity friends like David Prowse, who played Darth Vader in Star Wars. In early childhood, Lou was accepted into a special school called Pilgrims after testing off the charts for IQ. Pilgrims was a school for children like her that had eczema, asthma, and other conditions who were often used in medical research and experimentation, amongst other types of child abuse. She realized at age 9 she had forgotten her past when on a live talk show she was asked a question about a childhood event and couldn't remember anything at all. Her mother's decades-long friendship with a Grandmaster Knight of Malta named Andrew Birdie led to further abuse and programming. She also was used for covert missions in her late teens and 20s, going to places like Lake Erie and the Eco Village of Canada, where she was taught by people who had come up from a CIA training base. She also attended events as a child at Westminster Abbey with the Duchess of Kent and Pinewood Studios. After Lou's father died when she was 30, she discovered photos and exploitation material he had taken of her as a child, and it was then she discovered she had dissociation. Lou has done extensive healing and learning over the past few years to better understand what happened to her as a child and is still on her healing journey to this day. Today is the first time Lou is publicly speaking about what happened to her as a child, and it's a great honor we get to learn about and hear her testimony for the first time. Lou believes it's important people know the truth about the Grandmaster and Masonic orders practicing old Babylonian magic in every tradition, especially the left-hand path. There is such a veil over the eyes of society that such heinous abuse, crime, and corruption could be at the highest levels of these secret societies, and it's testimonies like Lou's that will help lift that veil from everyone's eyes. Lou is so brave and courageous for coming forth to share her testimony, and I ask you all to please put away whatever you're doing, give her your full attention as we shine a light on some dark topics and expose what's been hidden for far too long. It's time to make the world a better and safer place for children of the present and future, and it's heroes like Lou who are going to make this dream a reality. Before I finish introducing today's guest, I wanted to give just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you'd like to be on the podcast, share any information privately with me, or send me a written testimony for my upcoming book series, or to be written in a Substack article, you can email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com or standbysurvivors@protonmail.com. As some of you know, my YouTube channel was recently terminated, and I've been forced to pivot and use other streaming platforms to get this important information out to the public and disclosure community. Your support would mean the world to me on alternative platforms like Rumble and X, where I'm currently streaming, and I also just started another YouTube channel with the handle at Imagination Podcast Official that I will be rebuilding and would love to have you all subscribe there as well while I figure out how my new presence on YouTube will look in order to dodge the censorship and backlash for speaking out about these difficult topics. Thank you all for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. So, you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, voice for the voiceless, survivor and survivor advocate, overcomer, walking miracle, and absolute hero and warrior, the one, the only, Lou. Lou, thank you so much for being here with us today. What an honor to have you on.
Thank you for that introduction. That was amazing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you have quite an extensive biography. You've lived quite a life in your adult life all the way down to when you were born. And I know that this started way before you. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe paint the picture of your family history. I know you mentioned there's bloodline connections. There's different connections that family members had to the things that you were exposed to after you were born. So I'd love to hear, how far back did this start and who all was involved and, kind of what did that lineage look like before you arrived?
So, as you mentioned, up until I was 9, I had blocked out all my memory, and I didn't realize that I had no memory at all until I was in a live TV show, which was trying to get children from this new school called Kilroy in Britain, like a talk show. And he said to me, you were bullied. What sort of names were you called? And I tried to think back to my history and I couldn't remember anything at all. So that was the first time I realized that I had no memory. Actually, it illustrates switching. I was in front of cameras. Um, and apart from that, I thought that was normal. At the time, I thought, yeah, it's totally normal not to have any memory at all for that whole period of life. Um, and then I didn't really understand that I was dissociative until I was 30. So between the age of 9 and 30, I had no idea about dissociation or any of these effects, and couldn't place any of the results that I was going through anywhere. So I had to kind of piece together the puzzle of those years before my memories started coming back more clearly. And as a teenager, I did have flashbacks and memories, but obviously couldn't place them or frame them in any way or give any context to them. So, um, what happened historically was my mum was a channeler. She did yoga and healing and had people visiting when I was growing up for healing. She didn't charge money. Um, and she was introduced to all of that by a gentleman called Stephen Jenkins, who wrote a book called The Undiscovered Country about ley lines. Was very interested in all the esoteric stuff. And he was also someone who went to Mongolia and became the first Buddhist, a Mongolian Buddhist, studying something called the Diamond Pathway. Um, and he was friends with Andrew Barty, who went on to become the Grandmaster of the Knights of Malta, which my mum understood as the Knights Hospitalier and to do with charity. And that's it. That was her framework for him. Um, he actually came around for dinner and with family gatherings regularly throughout the 70s and up until he was inaugurated as a prince at the time, as Grand Master and has royal bloodline. And he came to see what my mum's writing. She did automatic writing, which she was suggested to do at the beginning of all her spiritual stuff. She was suggested this, do automatic writing. She sat down one day. She was getting tingles in one arm, and a spirit came to her and said, "I'm stood by your side. I'm one of love." And she began to write. And this spirit was called Mahakala, which is the Lord of Time. But if you understand a bit more about who the Lord of Time is symbolically, there's a lot more to it than just the Lord of Time. So Mahakala is a Tibetan deity, but then you have Kronos, who's figurative as the Lord of Time, seen in a lot of pictures that depict him devouring children as a kind of illustration of that. So there's a bit more to that spirit than just one of love. And he taught my mum yoga esoterically. And I grew up doing yoga. I grew up with a lot of different influences like Hindu, pictures of Shiva on the wall, less so Christian. We didn't go to church. I had a picture of Jesus on the wall. My nan was very Christian, very simple Christian. She was a really, really good, kind person. So, and quite poor growing up. She was very different. And what I think happened was that we had the right bloodline in our family. My grandfather, he was the son of a German lady who was also a spiritualist who came over to Britain. And and my nan's father, my nice nan, her father was uh, his name was Percy Moulding, which sounds very simple and quite poor again. But his lineage went all the way back through the kings and queens of early Britain to Denmark and Odin and Freya, which I didn't find out till a lot later when I traced my family history. I thought Odin and Freya were gods and mythical characters. Apparently not. Apparently they're, Nimrod and part of all of this system. So that was a bit of a shock. So I had that bloodline, and I had a Welsh bloodline through my father's mum, who was Welsh, but she died in the war in the Blitz. And all my great grandfathers died in World War One as well. So I lost all four great grandfathers in that era. So historically, they knew about this bloodline, but we didn't. And I think my mum was interfered with as a child. She speaks about being abused, didn't tell me till many years later. She has a lot of hallmarks of programming, if you like, and hasn't identified it herself. She just talks about tunnels, and she's mentioned a lot of things like that, and having some kind of harassment early on in her 40s. So I can't really go into her experience, but my experience was of her having two sides to her, very dissociative, and I think she really illustrated early programming, which was quite brutal, and later on I think it was refined to be more hidden. So like Kim Noble was described as the gold standard of dissociation, and I thought, what a strange title to describe someone as if that's an achievement. Well, it was an achievement for them because it meant that people had complete amnesia for these other parts. And because I had such strong amnesia, I really recognized that in her experience. And then where do we get to? So mum was busy doing spiritual stuff, yoga, talking with these Masons about things like the Antichrist over dinner, and being generally influenced. And I came in on the scene about August the 8th in the 70s. And the 8th is quite a figurative number, and a lot of survivors, they all have this 8/8 birthday. I've got heterochromia as well, which you've mentioned on another show, which is where your eye has a light around the pupil. But of course, I didn't know any of that as related to this stuff until a lot later. So as a child, I had to sort of piece together my childhood without my memories, just in who was there, where was I, the kind of factual things that I know. I call my truth anchors because I know they definitely happened and these people were definitely there at the time. So as a baby, I had a severe skin problem at a year old. My mum said I was like a basted turkey crawling on the ground. And she couldn't pick me up because I was so painful at that point. So I had this, but then she helped me recover. The medical treatment didn't help, and she stopped doing what they said, and I got better. I think there was more to that than just a natural occurring thing. And then as a 3-year-old, I had an uncle who looked after me once, and he described me as climbing the walls and never leave me with that child again. But he was an extremely tough person who actually had done something to do with the mafia because they'd phoned up when he was having end of life care to say do you want treatment anywhere in the world? And he said, no, it's a bit late for that. But they all showed up to his funeral. So my uncle was a very tough man doing something on that score. But he was also very helpful to people, helped homeless people and things like that. So there's always two sides to this. Everybody's not just a big baddie. There always have these two sides to them, and often reverse. Often it seem good people. And but anyway, he couldn't handle me as a 3-year-old. So that could handle the mafia, but not me. And then when I was 4, there's a photograph of me. I don't know if you could show me the 4-year-old picture. So I have a whole body shot of me sat on a beach on holiday. And for years I had this photograph, but I couldn't, I'd never actually looked at it properly. And I looked at it in the last couple of years and realized I had bruising all over my body, on my eyes, chafing around my neck, on my arms. That one. So that's when I was 4. And you can see I've got black eyes there, but I literally looked at this photograph for decades without ever seeing the bruising on my face and my arms and my neck. So I was doing yoga with my mum on this beach at that time in Spain or France, I think. So around me at this period of time, I had foster siblings, 2 foster siblings that I later forgot I had until I found the photographs after my dad died. And we had 2 siblings, aged 6 and 4. Um, and I found some photographs of us all in a bit of a state of undress. And my dad had taken photographs of me in a state of undress, and I do remember that. And didn't know it was wrong until my mum came in and said, "What are you doing?" to my father. And he said he made an excuse about it. But at the time, I remember it being a supposed game or something, but I felt uncomfortable about it. So that was a memory I had that came back before I was 9. But they were really triggered when I was 30 and found these photographs
And
and
so
was
I'm
like,
guessing too, your father was your father programmed? What was his background?
so my dad was orphaned. He was sent to Belgium after the war on an exchange trip. He um, he was evacuated in the war, so he was part of the evacuated from home children. Don't know what happened to him, where he was evacuated to. Um, he didn't show signs of dissociation like my mum did, but he did have a bit of another life. He had an affair, had another child with another family. We found out. I've never found out who this child is. My mum won't tell me the name, but she found out. Um, and he worked at Shirley Oaks Children's Home, which was one of the big children's home abuse scandals in Britain, where 1,800 kids were abused by over 80 paedophiles over half a century. So he worked there as a builder. As when I was a small child, he was there by the church, I think. Um, he was friends as he worked as a model for a little while and was friends with David Prowse, who was the Darth Vader actor and in Star Wars, and so knew all the Hollywood lot. But he also knew Jimmy Savile. There's a photograph of him somewhere, and with Jimmy Savile pretending to pick him up because he was one of these strong men. So they're always after finding these really strong, big, powerful, these different kind of athletic aces like the Aryan thing. So I think he was part of that on some level. He was in the film Clockwork Orange too, which is the mind control movie. Most people know about that. So David Prowse was around. He knew Jimmy Savile and Hollywood lot. And yeah, so I was living in South London, where near where this children's home was, with all this abuse going on that my dad was at, and so these were the sort of snapshot of people that were around me in my early childhood. And between that picture when I was 4 years old and the picture that you put on accidentally at first when I was 9, you could see the difference. Now, as a toddler, I remember having empathy. I remember being at nursery school and looking after kids, like taking some kids with emotional or learning difficulties under my wing and being protective of them. I remember my brother being hit by foster siblings with a door, so they would bang his head in the door frame, and I was just in nappies, and I was trying to scream to get some help for him for them to stop doing that. So I remember having this empathy, but by the time I got to school, I was very steely. I didn't have empathy, and I remember looking at other kids and thinking, what feelings should I be feeling? Should I be feeling happy? Should I be feeling sad? How do I do a happy face? How do I do a sad face? So I'd been stripped to the bottom line of those experiences through programming on different levels. And obviously, didn't understand why I had forgotten everything at 9. And 9 was a pivotal point because I got so unwell. If you bring that photograph up, you put on at first with me looking poorly when I was 9. I had been poorly for several months. I remember before I got poorly with my skin, I was extremely disturbed child, distressed child, unhappy, trying to reach out to people, and having all sorts of problems at home. Um, I remember just being a bit of a runaround child and doing petty theft and things that you shouldn't know about when you're that age. But I think a lot of behaviours that you're very young and you're reaching out. And I had quite a few red flags growing up that you wouldn't have unless something happened. But now I realise, like, I found blood in my underwear and didn't know where it come from before this age, so before I was 9. But I would just, those sort of things would get swept under the carpet. It's just something I had to deal with. And then the stress built up incredibly. I was having nightmares about demons feeding off me every night. And my mum was doing healing on people in the next room. So there's this real conflict of she's channeling and doing healing on people and they're getting better. And I'm being devoured as a child by these demonic spirits. So that was going on in my experience. And then freaking out every day because of this heightened home environment. And the other weird thing about home was we had a blue room, which was for spiritual stuff with a blue carpet, and a pink room for entertainment, which was, and I had a red room, which was quite unusual to say the least, I think, to describe them like that. But red room's quite pivotal in some of their stuff. Anyway, sorry, you might have to catch me up where I've got to.
No, thank you for sharing that. I've had other podcast guests that say that at home there was color-coded rooms and they think it was for color
Yeah,
programming.
I had psychologists or psychiatrists come, or a couple of people come, because I went to hospital in this period when this eczema skin was very bad, and to give my parents respite care, they called it, but they kept me in for months, much longer than they ought to have, because it was just supposed to be for some allergy testing or something. And I was seeing these people visit me in this hospital. Now, this hospital is quite important. It was called the Royal Alexandra Children's Hospital, and it was built in 1880. And it has statues of demonic and the horned god on the side of it. I don't know if you can pick that up. In one of the pictures I shared, the hospital and the mural and a few pictures of that. Um, So why is a horned god or Dionysus on the side of a children's hospital, which was what it was built for? It wasn't on there before that, it was on there and built for that purpose. I was at that hospital for a while. It has 6 underground stories. Another friend of mine, when I went to the special school for kids with asthma and eczema, they also went to this hospital. And she described a story where she was put out on the balcony along with a load of other kids on Halloween. Why would they put most of the kids out on Halloween, apart from one child who had quite a disfigured face? They put all these kids out on this balcony on Halloween, and she remembered seeing some kind of disembodied spirit that scared her, and then she passes out. But So that was her experience at the same hospital. And in discussing it, we found out about these other 6 stories beneath the hospital. And it links to this mural, actually. You've just brought that up separately. I don't know if you can show the whole thing, the picture with the whole mural of the street. And the hospital pictures. So these are from this mural in the same town as the hospital in Brighton. And they show this picture here shows dissociative kids with dunce caps on as lighthouses, or a bit like the 2 Masonic pillars. The kids look unhappy. You've got Dagon, the fish-headed god there. You've got umbrella. If you go along a bit further, show some more of these pictures, that'd be great. So this is the whole mural. My friend sent me this that lives in Brighton, and they said, this is really weird. I walk past it every day. What is it? And I looked into it, and we found out that it was a map, like a billboard sort of map. And the center tile that you can see where the arrows are, had some Greek writing on it. And I managed to decode this writing, and we realized that they changed it when my friend phoned me up and said, oh, the tiles changed. I managed to decode it. It was just mirror numbering and Greek letters. You could make it bigger and read it. And it spelled out a road called Dyke Road in Brighton, and the number, and it was a pupil referral unit that was an old building used for troubled kids. And it had a basement because it used to be like a club hotel type place. And so this mural pointed to that place, with loads of dissociative kids. If you show some more pictures, there it is, as well, as big as I could get it. If you could go, these are some of the graffiti around the hospital in the same town. Unhappy looking kids. That effectively says child love, really. And all over this town, there's a lot of symbolism. So this is a hospital. You've got pictures of the hospital at the bottom, and the horned god on the side of the building. And in just to the left in that mural is also a horned god. But that mural is 2011. So this symbolism's been going on for ages. And in the pictures, you can see dissociative flying kids. They all see an eye, the over the rainbow stuff. And these pastel colors are used actually on the buildings themselves in some places. So that indicates a bit more. Anyway, I took some of these stills off Google. The next time I went back on Google to check, they had one of those bay hats, somebody wearing a hat with a bay written on it. I was like, wow, are they trying to tell me something? But it's their stuff, so it's not my bucket of crap, excuse my language. It's their bucket crap. Anyway, so I was in this hospital for a bit before I went to the school. I came out of the school, came out of the hospital, and I got really ill to the point my mum thought I'm going to die. So she found a way to get me into this special school. But in order to get into it, I had to pass an IQ test, and which is crazy. Like they made every child take this IQ test to get into the school for a physical illness. So I did the IQ test, and my IQ was off the chart, which was why they gave me a place at the school, because it's quite expensive to go there. And I get the impression they didn't want me to go there, whether it was because there was more access to me outside of that, I don't know. There are more people involved at that school that looked out for kids, trying to help kids. Whatever. But at that point, when I went to that school, I realized I had no memory. My skin got a bit better from medical attention over the first month or two. I met a lot of other kids who had severe asthma and eczema and stress-related stuff, and it was all for genetic inherited problems. So there were kids with diabetes, there were kids with heart transplant, there were kids with cystic fibrosis, and there were kids, with a wide variety of things, but very small school. Later on, there was a connection with that school. A lot of celebrities would come in for charitable events and like helicopter in, and obviously Princess Margaret was patron of the school, um, and she visited and met us there. Um,
How many kids total would you say were at that school at the time you were there?
it was very small, about 70 kids were there, and it was sort of lauded because the kids got better with the proper medical treatment and food, and also being away from home. A lot of the kids had really difficult backgrounds. Their family homes were tumultuous, to say the least, and from all varieties, wealthy backgrounds, poor backgrounds, all everywhere. Yeah, so it was a very small school, and I was there up until I was 15. Um, but in this period of time, I definitely had some access because I had marks on my body. I actually had a house parent point out a surgical scar on my back. As far as I knew, I'd never had surgery. The Grandmaster was an honorary surgeon, which I found out later. Um, so I was like, I don't know where I got this scar from at school. I also had symmetrical signs on my limbs of like burns. I don't know if it was a result of electric shock burns or something of that nature, because it was always symmetrical on my body, but I didn't have a clue how they were there and how it happened. My dissociation was pretty complete by the time I went to that school. I didn't know. Um, I didn't know about things happening. I had memories that my mum later was like, "That didn't happen." When I described a memory to her, that never happened. So I had cover memories, which I didn't know were cover memories for certain times. Um, I left that school. I had quite severe depression after leaving. I was given a scholarship to a college and put for the Oxbridge exams, which is going to Oxford or Cambridge. But in that period, I was really struggling and dropped out of college. I was in Brighton, the college was in Brighton, which was the same town where everything else was happening. I think there was a connection between certain people in this town and my school, like the doctors in the school and the head teachers. There was definitely a Masonic link in this whole circuit of people. Um, Andrew Barty actually worked at a college. He was working at Worth Abbey, which is a Catholic college, and it was missed out in the ICSA child abuse trials. So it was the only one of the Catholic Abbey schools not included, even though there were victims that had come out about child abuse in that area. So at this point, I became a survival instructor. I tried college a few times, didn't work. I became a survival instructor because I had to do something to offset the depression. So I was trying to solve problems. I was always trying to solve whether it was health problem or whatever. And I knew exercise helped, so I managed to get this job as an instructor. And I got better with the depression. I managed to get the job. I became an adventure instructor in Cornwall, teaching people and kids for quite a while. And then I had, towards the end of the year of that, an overwhelming urge that I should go to Canada by September, by the end of the month. And I never wanted to go to Canada. This is what's weird about this. I wanted to go to South America. But this first travel plan, I kept having, you must be in Canada. I must be in Canada by the end of the month, on repeat almost. And we had friends of the family who were Canadian. So I went out there and stayed in Ontario, near Lake Erie, um, with a herbalist friend of the family who I'd only met, I think, briefly before. And then I was in Canada for almost a year, and I stayed at the Eco Village headquarters of Canada, which was run by a really nice couple called Barb and Milton. But he was an ex-ballistic missile engineer, and Barb let me know that they had come up from the farm in Virginia, which I didn't know at the time was the CIA training base. So I was like, had no idea about these other people involved in these things, but was in this eco village, story. In that period of time in Canada, I went to the university in Toronto. I met people. I had the same weird things going on. I must meet this person here, and off I went and met this person, which was somebody who was related to the Nigerian poet that had been killed in relation to Shell over the oil fields in the tribal village. So I met some of his family. And this is just the weird part of the weird stuff that has happened in my life is I don't really know why I'm doing this stuff, but I have to meet this person, I have to meet that person, so on. For other reasons, I think. And the people around me were always in military or in some level of that world, or politicians or different things like this. So I was there for quite some time in Canada and I lost a lot of time. I don't have a lot of the memories for that period. And this was in 97. But more recently, I've had memories come back. And it relates to some pretty big events in the world. And I haven't disclosed much about this stuff yet. I'm still trying to square it away with myself. But suffice to say that the Grandmaster is it's a military order, and they have authority over a lot of the three-letter agencies, a lot of charities, the diplomatic community, and this Masonic plan has been going on for centuries in relation to a lot of our events in the world. And the people they use to do that have been monarchs, that monarch trained children who can't remember anything, because that's the best kind of espionage there is that you don't have someone that remembers. They couldn't get people to do this of their own volition because you would never do it. Yeah. So I was used for something in Canada in that regard. Just leave it there for a minute. Afterwards, I was exhausted. Didn't know why I was exhausted. There was also a trafficking element in Canada, which is quite tough to talk about. But after I got back from there, I had a miscarriage, which relates to the trafficking. I didn't know why, right? So I'm going through that. Had some really big problems in that regard when I came back. Years later, I spoke to a psychiatrist about that and mentioned it to her, and she said, "Oh, you're not the first person I've heard come back from Toronto. First girl who'd been trafficked out there." So there's definitely a repeat thing going on there. So I came back. I had to sort of start again in this country, and it was the late 90s. And the group of people that I was friends with, about several kids, young teenagers, they were all people who'd had abuse. All of us. This handful of people I randomly met, all of us had had some kind of abusive, difficult childhood. And they were about half of them had definite signs of programming. One had been to school in Saudi Arabia, a Raytheon military school, and had signs of programming. Another one referred to themselves different names, had regression, childhood problems. And I was with these other people, and I thought I was all right at the time, that nothing had ever happened to me. And they all had these problems, and I didn't, even though I had the results of a lot of these problems and was dealing with that. So it's a bit like doing gymnastics, trying to remember, because it's like a huge narrative of different parts that were out at the different times. So I'm trying to hold it together to relate that. I ended up traveling to different places in this period of time. Not only was I an instructor, I did volunteer and did all sorts of different jobs back in Brighton and London. I went to Germany. That was a strange story. I definitely had handling involved in that journey. I went out there. I went to a university. I don't remember what I did at this university. I came out of there. I wasn't there for very long, just like a visit. I was staying in an apartment. I didn't know who it belonged to. I didn't know how I got to be there. Um, really odd things. And then on the journey back, we had a coach ticket, me and this friend, and at the last minute she was like, "Let's hitchhike." So instead of going on the coach, we hitchhiked back, and this was a time when a lot of Bosnian refugees were coming over to Britain, and lorry drivers have been told you can't pick anybody up because it's a £5,000 fine. And on this journey, at one point, a car had already stopped to pick us up when we got out of another car, which doesn't really happen in hitchhiking. Normally, you have to wait and show and indicate that you need a lift before someone, but we had lifts all the way back. And then when we got to the port, we also had people help put us on a tram. Someone was sitting in a car park at 3 o'clock in the morning saying, "Can I help you?" in Belgium when we were stuck. And they were like, "Just get on this tram." And we went on the tram into France. And then we got to the port and there was another lift. And then we got into the port and the lorry drivers waved us on past all these refugees saying, "You don't look like refugees." And off we go. But at the time, I was like, "Oh, it's such synchronicity and how amazing." And now I look back and I'm like, how easy for them to move people without you knowing and to handle people through individuals that are either also programmed or knowing who were like cutouts. And now I can spot them. It's really easy for me to spot them. Um, and so I don't know the full story of what went on there, but I know there's more than meets the eye. And that was in the early 2000s. Um, so we walked off the other end as foot passengers, and then my friend disappeared in a hurry. That was that journey to Germany. I've also been to France, Spain, Poland, Ireland, Scotland, like different places all over. With my family as a child, I went to Wales every year, which I didn't know about. Wales has a massive programming and paedophile ring problem, and obviously the satanic stuff is kind of immersed. If you just go down the street in Wales, it's in the windows, it's in the houses, it's part of the old religion. It's kind of that, but it's also underground, and police are involved, and that's Wales. Obviously there's a good side, there's a Christian side too, because a lot of Christians came to Wales. So there's a lost tribe of Israel background to Wales, where a lot of the words start with the root Abba, which is Hebrews or the Wanderers, Abba or Ever or Iber, like Hibernian. So there's this historical thing in Wales um, in regards to that kind of lost history. So I went there as a kid, didn't know about that till later that we went every year. Um, say 2000s. In this period of time, I did adventure instructing, and then I did hostile environment awareness training. Years later, actually, that was 2011. Um, and when, oh yeah, 2008 was the year that my dad died and Andrew Barty died, and the Grandmaster died that year. And that year was the same year I found out I was dissociated. Like it really came home that I was dissociated. One, I found the photographs my dad had taken and was just like, why did you take these photographs of us when we were little? And two, I'd known I had something going on because people would criticize me for talking childish, or speaking childishly. So they would be like, "Don't talk like that." Or my mum would say, "Why are you talking like that? Why are you speaking like a child?" Um, and so they were like a 5-year-old sort of part. So I only knew that I had dissociation because I've other people saying that, and then I'd also had other people call me by different names. So I'd obviously had a part with a different name. So they would be like, "Hi, Ruth, how are you?" And I'd be like, "Why are they calling me Ruth? And who is this person?" Or another time I had a boss who I didn't know was boss, it's just a man on the street came up and went, "Hi Lou, how are you? How have you been? I haven't seen you for a while." And I'm thinking, who is he? I don't know who this man is. And I was just trying to bluff it. And then some couple of months later, I was like, oh my God, he was my boss for like several months doing just some charity work. And I had completely forgotten him. And that was a result of the switching. That was how much that I dissociated, that I didn't know who he was. Until that part obviously came back or communicated this information. Um, I to and fro between Brighton and London in the early 2000s, and Hastings as well. It's sort of another place that I was at. Um, I had chronic fatigue syndrome after I came back from Canada, which took me quite a few years to get better from. So I did Tibetan medicine in London. I was studying Tibetan Buddhism with different lamas in this period of time. I identified kind of as a Buddhist. I had a lot of psychic abilities. I had telepathy. As a child, I was completely telepathic. And then even in my 20s, I would be anticipating or understanding what people were asking questions before they asked it. So I'd answer someone's question when they thought it. Um, so I had a lot of those abilities. In Canada, I'd done Native American survival training and spiritual stuff and exercises like picking a tree, being blindfolded, spun around, and then having to find your tree, if you like, while you're blindfolded. Those kind of extra sensory exercises. I did remote viewing without realizing that's what it was called, like all the time. I just easily could go out my body and see what was going on from either a high vantage point or for different reasons. Um, but now I understand that they could call that part to do whatever they wanted to do in that regard, but I didn't know that. So my experience was just having those experiences. Um, so when when I was 30, I realized that I had dissociation. I read about it. I was like, wow, that's what I have. I thought I just had PTSD, but quite extreme. I realized I had quite hefty dissociation, but didn't know the full extent of it. The Grandmaster died. I had some kind of interesting experiences around the time of my dad dying spiritually. And I had a few years where I was in France with my mum after this time because she had no one to help her at all. So I was helping her for this period of time. And I started to get emotionally more equipped. I had no emotional intelligence, and I worked with an amazing therapist called Darlene Wiemat, who's done Emerging from Broken, which was all about spotting lies and seeing when people have lied to you and what the truth is. And so I did that. I worked with her for a while and began to see like loads of lies, just like one lie on top of another lie, just layered in everywhere I looked in my life. And spiritually, probably the biggest lie. So the satanic part of my childhood was these spirits coming through. You know, my mum channeled something called the Flayed God, which is a South American kind of Mayan spirit. She channeled this Mahakala Lord of Time, and it was all love, light, and peace, which is a lot of the New Age stuff is love, light, and peace. And a light seemed to come in, and her face would sort of change. And when you see Tibetan lamas, their face also changes, like a light superimposed, and you can see that with sort of spiritual eyes, I suppose. But I realized in this few years that this dissociation was huge, but I'd done Tibetan Buddhism and yoga to a really advanced level. Like I quietened my mind and I got blissful and I had the experiences, but it didn't address this dissociation. I could still have those experiences and be dissociated, and nothing was addressing that experience of splitting, of regressing to be like childlike. And um, when I returned from France in 2011, I went, I tried working. I had quite a kind of burnout period of time. I was doing chefing, I had concussion and stuff, and it was quite a difficult time. And in that period of time, I went to a psychiatrist and said, I've got burnout, I'm having problems, I'm dissociative. And this was a couple of years ago, 2013, and tried to get some help at that point. Um, Now, when I was in London, in the 2000s, I had worked at one point 2 different jobs full time and lived in 70 different places. In a 3 month period, I was homeless. And this period happened before 2007 or in 2007, before July. Um, and it was really chaotic. It was hugely chaotic. And I'd been invited to work up there by someone and by a friend. And yeah, stayed in all these places. And I carried a rucksack with me and I went on the underground train every day up until July the 7th, when the bombing happened in Britain. And on that day, which was totally random, I had a survival selection course to join a course for instructing survival qualifying out in the woods. So I didn't get that train that morning. I went on a different train. The train that I would have got on was bombed that morning. So all of that event happened after I had this really chaotic period of time in London, wandering around with a rucksack all the time. Um, and that's kind of relevant. So I then qualified as an instructor, teaching survival for a year. And then I'd gone to France, come back, Grandmaster had died. And then I started to get help with dissociation and counselling. But I switched repeatedly. So for the last several years, I've had dissociation. I've been switching repeatedly to young sort of child part, about 5 years old, and I had a few of these parts really obvious at first. 5, 8 years old, one integrated really quickly. But I still generally throughout every day have the switching quite common. Um, that's 5-year-old part. And that part is used to being out a lot, because they field everything a bit like an adult. So they might sound like a 5-year-old and they might have the behavior of a 5-year-old, and they definitely have the emotional intelligence of a 5-year-old in some ways, but they also like they can't do the shoelaces up. So there's me being an instructor, and at times I haven't been able to do my shoelaces up, even though I was in these demanding jobs. If I'd switched into that part, now generally the switching is kind of needs must. So it seems to be that when you need to be a certain way, like instructor mode, you be that part and it's very focused. Or when I was chefing, I was very focused, that part that could cook. Or if I was 5-year-old part, I couldn't do that kind of stuff. So it really destabilized me. So these amnesic walls between these parts were so strong that those capabilities went up and down accordingly. Um, and were mistaken by other people. Like I had a boss when I was teaching abseiling that was like, "Have you been smoking weed?" I was like, "No, I've never smoked it. I've never smoked for an hour." He thought I'd smoked it. I was like, "No," but I was dissociating while I was doing it. It was quite trancy. I was sat on the edge of a cliff. I was still safe doing what I was doing, but with the rope work and everything, but I had dissociated to some level. So other people saw that. I think I'm getting a bit all over the place now. So, um, and then that brings me up to more recently. Just I've still been having counselling 5 years. I was the only one to get the counselling in Dorset, which was the county, and they didn't. I said they wanted to give me the wrong treatment for the wrong thing at first, and I said no, I want to have the right treatment for the right thing, so that other people can get the right treatment for the right thing, which was long-term counselling. But they actually allowed that to happen. Um, yeah, so and then it's just been a case of piecing together the fragments and the evidence and um, trying to get some stability between these parts. And more recently, those amnesic walls have come down quite a lot, and more details have come out for all the gaps that I've had in the past. Yeah, I'm just going to check my notebook if that's all right, because I wanted to make sure I covered a few things. Yeah, there's a few things I haven't talked about that I missed out.
Your story is just incredible, and some of the things that you talked about, I wanted to make sure we really dove into sort of a message that I think is really important to get across to people for some of these things. So one of the things I wanted to revisit was this Grandmaster. I think
Mhm.
there's a lot of survivors that have been abused by secret society members in high positions.
Yeah,
And you can choose as much or as little as you want to share, but I think what you went through is really important for people to know because these people are right in our communities. There's lodges for them to gather at everywhere in every country, here in the United States, every city, every state. I'm sure it's very similar in, where you're at. And so I wanted you to talk a little bit about how that segment of your life happened and, to talk a little bit about, why it's important that we know about this and kind of what they're doing to children.
yeah. So, from my mum's experience, she described the Grandmaster as somebody that wouldn't hurt a fly, right? She also said, she described this event that happened where she asked him, "How can you be a Christian, Catholic, and a Buddhist? How do you manage being all of those things?" And he replied, "It's not difficult." Right. This is one quite an insightful thing. Like she had cottoned on to the deceit there with that question, because you can't be a Christian, a Catholic, and a Buddhist. They they preclude each other on some level. And a Mason ultimately was the umbrella, was the Masonic tradition, and it it highlighted a lot to me. When you read the Bible, it says don't call somebody master. It has these kind of things in it that, or father, and the Catholic Church calls people father, and Masonic tradition it's master. So it already, that's not being a Christian. Um, he had loads of red flags. So he's at this Catholic church, and he's um at school, school, Catholic school, with abuse going on. My family's got this abuse circuit around us. David Prowse knew Savile. Savile was in the Order of Gregory, met the Pope. Grandmaster met the Pope. I actually have the Grandmaster's voice as a lot of my programming, so I hear his voice in my head saying stuff. And sometimes it's positive stuff, not always negative stuff. One of the things I have is that Wizard of Oz program with the other books of the Wizard of Oz. I only thought that there was one book called the first book, Wizard of Oz, but there's like 12 books, and I knew loads of these books off by heart, but we never had them in my childhood home. So where on earth did all of that come from that I knew about it so accurately? Um, but it's been revealed by the survivors that that's part of the programming. Um, a lot of the experiences I have and the memories I have are really related to the psychic and spiritual side of it. So just as my mum was very spiritual and downloaded all of these entities, who then related messages. One example of that is Stephen, who was the one that introduced her to this automatic writing, hadn't heard from his teacher in Mongolia for a long time, a lama. And mum channeled a message from this lama saying, "It's okay, I've been unwell, everything's all right." And then my mum relayed this message, and then later on he got a letter saying, "Yes, everything's all right." He's just been unwell. So there was this kind of Mongolian connection. Um, Andrew Barty was also Tibetan Buddhist, and Stevens helped set up the Tibetan Buddhist monastery in Britain called Sami Ling. So there's a huge Buddhist connection. And my mum's spiritual teaching was this Mahakala Tibetan Buddhist deity. And I was studying Tibetan Buddhism, which is like magical stuff, right? So there's this huge emphasis in the magical abilities and psychic abilities, and they are practicing immortality, things about immortality and magic in the lodges. It's the main theme. All of the symbolism you see around you in society, our architecture, and the ley lines where things are built. And this children's home, Shirley Oaks, was built on a ley line that went from Cleopatra's obelisk in London all the way down to where my hometown was on the south coast called Peacehaven, where another obelisk is. It's the meridian on the centre. And I thought, how weird is it that there's a children's home having all of this awful abuse right on it, and then my home has all of this crazy spiritual circulating vortex stuff going on with all these entities just able to freely come and go from where we were, and the children's hospital, not far away. So there's this kind of inverted reality going on in a spiritual sense. A lot of my early childhood stuff that is related to that was rituals that my family went, well, I think I was more taken out of my family to go to them. My dad used to drive me places at night. I don't have the memory when I was very small in this country. I went to places like Westminster, Pinewood with my school. We went for trips to theme parks. Growing up at home, away from the school and at the school, we went to the Prince Regent Centre, which is like a swimming complex in Brighton. But there's another survivor who I can't remember his name off the top of my head, also went to this Prince Regent swimming complex, and describes being taken down to another level. So there's always an underground level to them. And it's not far away from the Children's Hospital, really, in the town. There's tunnels all underneath Brighton. They link up with the law courts. They link up with the Crown Prosecution Service. My friend that had the hospital experience, she worked in the Crown Prosecution, and she noticed how they lost evidence in the Crown Prosecution Service. She had to carry evidence through to the police courts in these underground tunnels that were guarded, that had, steel doors and a security guard, armed security guard. And she said there was room enough for a bus, in this area under the town. I couldn't figure out how I got to and from certain places. I remembered a keypad and certain things like a mosaic stuff. The train station has a tunnel entrance from an area with a mosaic in Brighton. Where my school was and where my hometown was, there was a huge military complex from World War II that went all the way up to, I think it's called Firle, which is where the Opera House is in Glyndebourne, which you can see a lot of the weird symbol stuff there too. But that had a keypad going into it. Somebody shared photographs of that entrance with a keypad, and I was like, oh my goodness, I just literally had related that to my cancer, and then it came on this blog this guy had shared. I was on there. And what else? When I was at school, some of the kids had research done on them. So they'd be taken off to Eastbourne Medical Centre as like a 10, 11, 12-year-old. They were paid 50p a session by pharmaceutical companies to do this research. And one of them was 12 years old, and he had asthma. He was put in an air chamber on a running machine, and they switched the air off while he was running. This is an asthmatic. That's what they did in this medical centre. So he's one of the boys I went to school with. I'm not quite sure how much of the funding came because there was some kind of research going on, psychological research and different kinds of research. I'm also at that school. I mentioned the stars. So one of the housemasters had abused some of the kids there, some of the girls. He'd taken photographs of them doing pretty sadistic stuff, really. And he was the brother of the manager of the Spice Girls. He visited the school. So there's a bit of a link there with the abuse circuit going on. Um, yeah, there's so many overlapping circles of this stuff, and um, it's quite hard for me to stay focused.
Did they use you for those experiments also?
Um, I don't remember going on those trips. I don't remember that. I don't. I still have quite a few gaps that I can't fill in at all. So, I do know that I had some surgery done on me on my spine. But I never had surgery that I thought that I knew of. My mum's never told me I've ever had surgery of any kind. Um, and that relates to a memory. I've always had a memory of being hung upside down when I was little. Um, you know, the traumatizing memories that I've got where there's a few different ones and they came up at different times, but one was having being tied up, being hung upside down, um, feeling someone put their finger in my back, like so whether they had done surgery then without an anesthetic, then I could feel what they were doing. Um, there was I think, quite a heavy ritual done when I was 4, and I think that's the result of that was in that photograph. You can't see my arms in that photograph, but there are bruises all the way down, fingerprint bruises on me, and it was so weird how I never saw it till a friend pointed it out in the last year, and then it was like this veil lifted off my eyes and I could see it. But a lot of the ritualistic stuff, it's really hard to put it into words because, and I always find it astonishing other people can relate it with their memory because mine is so concealed that the part that's hidden is a really spiritual part on a theta level. So a brainwave that when you're sleeping, the only time I have access to it is when I'm just waking up. That's these in between times. And they had total access. It's kind of like the trance theta part of your brain. And so a lot of this heavy ritualistic stuff was done in that state. Um, so I know they did quite generic traumatizing. They put me in a cold water tank at some point with a dead body. I know that happened. Um, but I didn't know why. I didn't know why I had, I didn't know the before, the after, the who, the what, the when, the where. As a child, you're having a memory of trying to get something off of you and trying to get away from something. When I was at school, I drew a child in a cage and I got hauled off because I'd drawn this child in this cage, and they tried to get me to see a counselor at school, but they were a really ineffective counselor. I saw them for about half an hour and that was it. Realised they weren't appropriate. Um, I'd had abuse memories at school, but again, no context, no, not knowing why I had this extreme reactions to being tied or having anything around my neck, and um, yeah, the dead thing. There's a lot of dead body stuff, and I can't relate. I'm like the front part that relates to the world that seems pretty normal. My 5-year-old part was like the front part when I was little that relates to the world and is pretty normal. Um, and the the trauma sort of comes up underneath and influences the front part. So we'll get the PTSD, the flashbacks, this kind of stuff. Influence and then realize it's another part. So the ritual stuff, the first sign of it that I know of was just having those symbols deeply embedded in my psyche. So I had the symbol of the figure eight, the symbol of the all-seeing eye, the symbol of the swell, very deeply embedded. I would doodle them again and again and again. I would draw them, and it would help in a sort of subconscious way. So I've got a dog saying hello to me. It always comes up and I'm a bit struggling. yeah, so those symbols, I thought everybody had them in their psyche, but not everybody, they don't. People don't
And the
have
swirl,
the
you're
all
meaning
seeing
like
eye.
spin programming, right?
Yeah, spin programming, the all see and the all seeing eye, the triangle with the eye in the middle. This stuff was inside me, right? That's how it felt. And it was it's a doorway, a spiritual doorway. Spirit not good. He's an old dog. So there's a military, spiritual, a satanic connection, and it was very close. I couldn't point and say SRA happens in my family as a child. It's not dressed up like that. I didn't have people come around to my house dressed up like Halloween costumes. It wasn't like that. In fact, in the Bible it says, "Marvel, for Satan appears as an angel of light." Well, effectively, that's what my mum was channeling, was this sense, this angelic being, but there was all the wrong things happening around it. If a real angel's happening, they can heal the person that's ill. I was ill in the house. My mom was like, "I can't heal you." My mum would be rageful, extremely rageful at times, to the point that I was really frightened and had to um had to make myself scared, run away. Um, so there's this heightened spiritual stuff going on and this demonic stuff all the time growing up, just all the time. And then I can only pinpoint it by where I went to. We went to Westminster Abbey as kids, and we had to queue up outside to shake hands with the Duchess of Kent, and her husband is head of an order. And I was like, what a coincidence, there's a head of another order, in this memory of mine. And um, what else did we do in this period of time while we were at Westminster? We bussed up there. What else was going on? We went to Pinewood Studios to see, we was like in an audience, or to see this, or to see that. What else went on in these theme parks? Because I only have a couple of minutes of memory for these different events, and then nothing else at all. And I'm assuming that normal people remember what they did when they went to the theme park and went here and went there and did this and did that. And I have just gaps, and a large amount of it.
You had mentioned a couple locations where abuse took place or just where things, were very dysfunctional in your life. Did you have abuse that took place on a military base? I know you had mentioned one earlier, or a Masonic lodge. Where were you taken to, or where did this occur for you?
So, and this is why I was talking about the underground places. I remember underground tunnels. I remember pipe work on the ceiling. So walking through half-finished places, pipe work on the ceiling, and lit without windows. I remember being on like a metal trolley, like a gurney, trolley, medical trolley, a lot of hospital setting when I was very small. Before the age of 5, I was in a hospital and they gave me something that made me black out. But later on, I was like, wait a minute, I didn't have an injury that they had to knock me out for. I just had a slight cut on my hand. Like, um, why did they give me this that knocked me out? Before that, there was a time I had an injury when my whole face swelled up. Um, and I have 3 or 4 different stories about why that happened. And I realized that because I've got 3 different stories for the reason, that none of them were the reason, right? So I had actually got a hole going up through my sinus cavity and into my eye. I'm not sure if they did some kind of operation in that regard for that to be the result. But obviously, the dentist is like, no, this is this reason or that reason. And you don't get the full true story, but I do know that they did something quite radical. I suffered with pain for years after that event that caused that injury, but I didn't have like a falling over event or something to explain it. I just had the result. Um, yeah, so you kind of piece some things together backwards, really, about, I as that 4-year-old on that beach, I didn't have an accident. I didn't fall over in the park. I wasn't being hurt by anyone. We didn't have the foster siblings on that journey, I don't think. Um, there was only one that was violent. She was about 6, and they got rehomed after a while. Yeah, so you have the results, and then you have to deal with it. That's what I remember about that, and I remember the awful lot of this kind of necromancy death ritual thing. This kind of thing. Dead bodies. I still get triggered by anything that smells like that or looks like that. And someone asked me once, like, what were they doing? Were they chanting? What kind of magical stuff were they doing? And I was like, what language was it? I didn't know. I think it was Enochian now, but I wouldn't know that as a small child, what on earth language they're speaking in. I didn't have that kind of cult insight, being educated about what was going on. I had the opposite. I had the occulted, the veiled, the other reasons, the hypnotic, a lot of hypnotic stuff. I just know that I was accessed from a very early age, right up to my late teens, and I think the last time I was about 25. But like I say, I'm still in counselling at the minute. I've been in counselling 5 years. I've had uh, advice from that angle that included stuff like Blue Diamond, which is programming talk. See the diamond um, level programming results in getting given different gemstones. When I was young, I got given an amethyst. I remember using this amethyst, my first gemstone, which turned me the first gemstone in the programming stuff. And then when I was about 15, I got given heaps of gemstones. And you earn gemstones throughout all of this stuff. Ruth, the name that I was called, that's one of the parts of the Eastern Star programming. The Eastern Star, um, the Order of the Eastern Star. But I didn't know that as the front part. More recently, in 2021, I woke up very early in the morning as I felt a spirit come through my head. But before that had happened, that Theta part had recited a verse and to call that spirit in. And I didn't know anything about either what that spirit was or why that part had called that in. And that is programming that, they split that Theta part up out so it could call it in and taught it those verses so that it would call the spirit in on this particular time. So that happened in 2021. And it was such a shock because, every time I've discovered there's a part that fills the gaps of these memories, it really throws me. So that one was massive because I was like, how did she know this verse and this to call the spirit in, much like my mum was experiencing when I would watch her, these spirits would come in through her head like a light coming through, the same experience. And of course that spirit ties into the Knights of Malta because their 8-pointed star is actually the Venus goddess, so Inanna Ishtar, this ancient Sumerian goddess who's like half snake, half goddess. This kind of serpentine tradition. And what I suspect quite strongly now is that some of us have DNA that relates to those fallen angelic beings in the biblical sense, and then we're kind of that programming is, I'm not unprogrammed in the sense that someone's come along and unprogrammed me. I've just been having to piece together what works and find out what on earth's going on and why I have had the problems I've had. And so, yeah, so they called that spirit in, and I was like, and I said, "What's your name?" And I was like, "What's the spirit? What are you called?" And they were like, "Inanna," and I was like, "Who's Inanna?" I didn't know as a front part anything at all about it all. So, yeah, so that's where I live. they've done this in my life and used those psychic abilities. And your mum had them, so obviously knew the DNA stuff. Um, and then obviously there's the German Nazi element. Knights of Malta had Nazis in them relating to that operation paperclip stuff. Bit stuck now.
And so, do you remember them using you with remote viewing and psychic abilities and spiritual gifts growing up? Was that part of, yeah. So,
Yeah, no, I remember seeing out of other people's eyes. I remember seeing people have heart attacks and not knowing why I was seeing them while I was there, seeing them have a heart attack, like a guy on the side of a football pitch, and I was trying to help the woman left behind, but because I strongly suspect that with everybody who's got a multiplicity, you do have a congenial, nice outside part, and then you have these thoroughly programmed parts that are like I said, when I got to the school, steely without emotion, and I spent years trying to learn empathy and feeling and relearn them because I'd had them when I was very small, but they'd been drummed out of me completely. These parts hold these particular emotions so that they can be used for a specific purpose. Um, and in my case, definitely psychic purpose. And I don't know, that's why I brought up the Moonchild stuff because um, I've actually got a Libra moon, but the Moonchild stuff is all related to Aleister Crowley, who's in Hastings, and he's another magical order. But the thing is that these people weren't independent of each other. They all knew each other, you know. So, for example, look at the picture on the front cover. There's a few pictures. I have another photograph that's almost exactly like a picture of myself, and it's kind of freaky to see that and to realize that there were these other people having these um, plans and then executing those plans, those magical plans. And obviously, there's a vast plan with the Masonic work, a great work, which we're seeing unfolding at the minute. It's bamboozling everybody one way or another. So I don't know if you could bring up the other photograph. Let me just check which one it is. So if you look what she's wearing, this is Gloria Vanderbilt. She's got that 8-pointed star around her neck. Strongly suggests she was a Dame of Malta. Shirley Temple was also a Dame of Malta, and interestingly, she's got the same name, Shirley Oaks. You know, it's a Druidic name, the oaks, the oak tree. I believe the Elon means oak. So Gloria Vanderbilt's twin sister was called Thelma, and her son was Baron Tony Finesse, the richest little boy in England, and he was best friends with the Grandmaster Andrew Barty, and he made the film Easy Rider about well, you know, it's like bringing drug culture, making it cool, and he also had a Mongolian connection. He ran a kind of Oriental society. I can't remember the exact name, but so that again, there's this Orient connection. But it's just seeing that link in the families. And if you bring up there was another photograph of Gloria Vanderbilt with the painting above them and her two children, obviously. I
yeah,
sent
this
it
is
now on
like an
Twitter.
iconic photo. This one's gotten shared a
It
lot
is,
online.
well, it explains a lot,
Yes.
doesn't it? So, I mean, you've got St. John the Baptist's head there. So, the Knights Hospitalier, the Order of Malta, is also the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, but it's different to the original St. John, John the Baptist in the Bible. St. John of Jerusalem was a later St. John that did charitable works. But I mean, that's a dark kind of satanic, tantric, magical picture. You can have the same, and you've got the sun and the moon and Jesus' body there, and the cross. You've got a kind of satanic twist on almost every tradition on earth. So a lot of traditions have a good version, a light version. It's kind of what they call Luciferian, because it's like the light bringer. Except Lucifer is the fallen angel in the biblical term, and then it's described as the morning star. So Lucifer is described as the morning star. Ishtar or Nana is described as the morning star and queen of heaven. And at the end of the Bible, Jesus describes himself as the morning star. But obviously, the morning star is under him, right? So you've got a morning star that's fallen, that's Lucifer, and then you have the morning stars that are unfallen. And the Venus is like rising and resurrection. So the Luciferian tradition is the opposite of that. It's the falling version. So this picture is really a picture of Antichrist. You've got the rooster on the right. That's a Masonic symbol right there, the rooster. Very much in that suggests her own programming. And it's sad because, right, so she's the Dame of the Night of the Order of Malta. So they're doing magic on this scale and ritual on this scale and dividing the mind of the kids. And everybody involved in society at the moment on all different levels have had this deception and have had this kind of splitting of the mind. And the people that are doing it have had their minds split. So there's a kind of really huge schism going on everywhere, with all of us facing this jumble of deceit and trying to figure out a way through. But you can see that's a really dark satanic picture, very much about the Antichrist. And there's a left-hand path of magic in Tibetan tradition. There's a right-hand and left-hand path, and the left-hand path is overcoming all adverse things, like things that you find horrible, like not being attached to them, which is really lauded in this military tradition, because you're not having an adverse reaction to death, for example. So you can see a dead body and not fall apart, kind of thing. And that an overcoming of attachments and desires is a huge part of this left-hand tradition. But you see it twisting so many things from good to bad, and inverting everything. And then saying it's right. So I grew up with pain being good. I thought pain was a good thing. I needed pain. And that was all programming. It's not natural for a child to be like, that's a good thing, to want that, or to go towards that. So the ritual stuff that I do remember is being tied down and a lot of pain, a repeated level of pain that wasn't something you can endure. But for the most part, I remember that recovery times afterwards and just dealing with the fallout from them, and exhaustion and drug wearing off symptoms. I was definitely drugged as a small child with drinks, like a squash kind of drink I was given. And it's pretty hard to pinpoint who the gatekeeping people were, i.e. who was the ones that took me from A to B and back again. My mum was dissociated, so she may have done that, but I can't pinpoint those things. I can't give a what, when, date, where, or stuff. I can just say I've got a surgical scar, but I don't know when the surgery happened. And I remember being hung upside down. I remember someone's finger in my back, which is not normal. And I have scars on my body from the electric burns. So they must have shot me, but I don't know where. I'm assuming the hospital or underground place.
And in,
Um,
I didn't put it in the bio, but you had mentioned in your notes that the Grandmaster, he was an honorary surgeon, was it?
he's an honorary surgeon. He
Is there
taught
a
judo.
possibility that he could have done something to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he did a lot of the prime programming, and that was why he was invested in my family for decades. I mean, he was somebody that would go off and meet Fidel Castro one day and Ronald Reagan the next. You know, like these were the jobs that you do as a grandmaster. You have this diplomatic relationship all around the world, ostensibly for other purposes. But if you're executing the great work and the events that manipulate the masses and carry out this magical plan, right? So you've got the Nazis' magical plan, the Satanic magical plan, the Antichrist magical plan, dressed up as charity. I mean, you only have to see you know what a charitable, good, kind person looks like. You know, if you look at them, there's not that in their body language, shall we put it? You know, that is a magical garb with them doing magic, and it's an ancient Babylonian or Sumerian magic that has all the traditions in the world. I mean, he understood Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which I knew was a lot of esoteric magic. He understood the Hindu, understood the South American, you know, all of the magical traditions. Because as a Mason, you study those things. You study immortality and you study magic. Um,
Do you ever remember being taken to lodges or having any events in your life happen there?
I not specifically just from the symbolism, only from like, you know, where do you see the all-seeing eye on, you know, we don't have it on the dollar, like the dollar like has it, but we don't have that. We have it on the lodge ceiling. That's where you see it. So, the memory that I do have about that was actually I saw a double-headed eagle, which is the German black symbol, so the Nazi symbol, was where I was taken to some kind of kitchens and I was had my arm burned. I was quite small then, in hot water, but it wasn't so hot that it would burn it off completely. And then I was made to burn another child's arm. And I actually can't remember her face. Actually, a lot of the faces of the people involved, I struggle to remember. And I think it's pretty easy to do that. If they can make me not see the bruises on my own body in that photograph for decades, they can say, can't remember the faces of these people. Um, yeah, they burnt me on. And I've always had for a long time that hot, cold, left, right thing going on. When I was at school, I drew a self-portrait. They wouldn't let me do art after I do this cage drawing with a child in a cage. It stopped me from studying art. I only study science. But I managed to do like some outdoor club where I could do art, and we did a self-portrait, and in it I'm split in half with like a healthy side that looks like myself, and then the other side is like a sort of skull with dark eyes and ruins and flames behind me because it was really I was expressing what was going on inside was the split. And they put that up in pride of place in the hall when you first went in the school building. You walk past that picture for years. So why did they put it there? It's not a nice thing to look at, but very successful splitting. That's that's their way of looking at it. The people handling it. Um, it's only now I'm getting parts from my 20s coming out now, filling in the blanks, and it scares me what they know. So, um, when I was in Canada, I met other people my age, like 18, 19-year-old boys, and I was working with them. on some of the stuff I did over there. And it wasn't like in my front part experience was doing conferences and going to university, and then there was this other side of it that I had no memory of for years, like just gap for ages, and then um, this part come up recently describing what I was doing, and I still can't, because they're using you and to do dark stuff. They're using um you to unfold their big plans, with lots of these individuals around who don't know they're being controlled. Then it's hard to see that you feature in that plan on different levels. So on one level, I know they've done it because they've heaped iniquity up on us, so we keep that sort of satanic connection there. But just being at a certain place and at a certain time is a ritual. You don't have to, being at a sports event, if they're abusing kids underneath it. That was another thing I'd say. But a lot of my triggers, one of my triggers was the roar of the sports stadium. So obviously, some of the stuff happened in that environment because, as far as I knew, I never went to a game, and yet that was a major trigger. And it's really crazy. It's like finding out you've got another head. And the other way it pops up is you can't find things because the parts put your credit card somewhere safe. You can't find it. But I mean, those are the kind of amusing things. But it's when you, like, at the minute my little parts are anxious because they have forgotten something. If they've forgotten something, they think there's another part that's been there, and it freaks them out because they're starting to gain awareness that they've all got parts. So it's like I get inscriptions that. Yeah.
And so when you started remembering, I know around age 30 was when sort of that veil came off and you were like, oh, my life isn't what it's supposed to be. But that wasn't necessarily when you had all the pieces together to know sort of how to talk about it to people. How was that received when you started talking about or confronting family or friends or sharing? What was the reaction from people and how did you navigate that?
Um, so my dissociative little part comes up, and most people could overlook it as just me sounding a little bit more light-hearted or just childlike. They wouldn't see it, but people that are close to me can see it. I've got close people. I don't try not to discuss my personal life, just keep it separate, for obvious reasons. But yeah, they can tell when I switch. My counselor can tell when I switch. My eyes will switch. My behavior changes. I'll look like a child in my eyes and my expression. Um, but in the past, most people didn't know about it being dissociative and would just criticize me for being childlike or speaking or yeah, just speaking more childlike. Now I'm able to say I'm having a problem um to people, but not openly, not widely. I don't talk about it to everybody. Um, it's a huge threat to open up and say you've got it, dissociation. It's like really you have to be vulnerable to do it and to show it. And um I know that the later programming they've done because they've used harmonic tones with me. I've had just the sound of a tone a couple of times a day every now and then. And Kathy O'Brien, her daughter, had similar programming, and I yeah, it's hard to get over that. It's not as easy as the earlier survivors to deal with who could just write everything out. It reinforces the programming every day. If you hear something in your right ear, that's affecting your left brain hemisphere, and the same the other way around. The other thing that happened in the last few months was I heard Morse code, military speed Morse code. And I knew that because I had studied a bit of Morse code at school out of just interest, but I'd never got that good at it. I was I was slow. You start off very slow and you can't decipher it, and it takes ages. And this was military speed Morse code. And I was like, I was really weirded out. It went on it was very quiet. I could get on with stuff and still hear it. And it went on for like a day and a half. So I contacted other survivors and was like, have you had anything happen without specifying to see if we'd had the same thing? And they said they'd had the same thing about several different survivors. I had Morse code recently. So um we obviously had programming to that level to be able to understand Morse code at that level. And that means that they can remotely contact or program people or give instruction without anybody even coming near them. Um, how does that relate to other people? So you have that experience and there's other people there, but obviously I'm not going to say anything. I'm like, oh yeah, I've got Morse code going on in my ear. This sounds crazy, but when you understand the level of technology that they have, it's not crazy. It's all set around wireless technology at the minute, and watching TV with red screen and blue screen split, which is again affecting your brain hemisphere. Um, you know, that's for the masses. That's the same premise. They've just refined it on the people they use to get their dirty work done without people knowing. I know that I took messages to people when I was in Toronto. Later on, I worked in Paris, and I went and met MEPs, so ministries of parliament, ministers of parliament in Paris. I had terrible French. My French never got that good. I was with somebody from Harvard, and I was going to see an MEP in the Quai d'Orsay, which is like. So I went to see MEPs in Paris, and that was for the Alliance for Middle East Peace, superficially, but there was other reasons. I meet people like that all the time. I'm always meeting, like I met the son of MI5, the head of MI5, like just randomly met him. Interesting guy, archaeologist type guy. Um, he'd met the head of the Stasi in Germany when he went out there when he was young. And this guy had said, if you ever need any help, give me a call. And some soldiers had picked him up and he gave him a call and was like, I need help. And he was innocent of the fact that this guy would have known exactly who it was, that he was the son of his opposition person in MI5, because you would know who you're working within an espionage sense. You'd know the heads of all the military and all of the Five Eyes and all of the people and their families. Of course, they knew that the head of MI5 son was there, but his son didn't. It was over his head on some level. It was funny. Um,
It's amazing
yeah.
how deep the military is involved with this and how
Oh yeah, yeah.
nobody knows.
Hugely. And like I was befriended when I came back to England by people who were married to military people who were in a lot of the truth stuff and the truth movement of what's coming out about vaccine injuries or whatever. I don't know if I can solve that out with it causing problems, but yeah, I had people befriend me, and then got invited to a party where I met quite a few other military people, and they all kind of interviewing me a bit, and obviously came to a decision, and then they kind of went very really bright, didn't really give permission. I kind of got pulled into it and given excuses. And I had a problem with my eye afterwards, of like flashing light in my eye afterwards that you don't normally get from a normal camera flash, you normally right. So I had some weird stuff with that. I expect forces. I worked with the forces before. Um, I don't think all of them are in the know at all. In fact, far from it, a lot of them are programmed themselves to do their orders and be very compartmentalized. And I like a lot of people. I met a lot of people you like. Grandmaster was charming and eloquent, told funny stories, and a lot of people are all of those things in the circus. But there's this other hidden side that is saying it's okay to abuse kids in a like it's making it look like opportunistic, but it's not. Like Savile had an Amiga badge on his military uniform. You can see a photograph of it. That's a programming badge. So there's a crossover in their world with the ritual, the great word, the programming, the fronts, like you would have a front for the CIA or for money laundering or something. You have the fronts, the charity, the things that allow you to move freely everywhere, the hospitals, the medical, it all crosses over. And, on the receiving end of people like myself and the people on your podcast that have been trying to figure out what the right way up is from it all. And for me, a lot of that was a spiritual betrayal because he was someone professing to be Christian, and yet there was abuse going on at his school. And on the first occasion of that, he should have been, as a knight, defending the children, right? As a knight, defending them. But that's not evident anywhere. In fact, the opposite is evident, isn't it? And this is the incredulous thing about it is um how it was used to program, how it was used to refine research in programming individuals, I think, to drive to massive people. And the spiritual betrayal for me, I had the Buddhist tradition. I hadn't read the full Bible. I had this Hindu tradition. I had channeling. I had this kind of satanic stuff I didn't know about that was going on inside. Um, like the spinning with related goddesses, and I had been attached to that goddess deity, if you like, very strongly. And even though it had different names and different traditions, it's the same thing. And suddenly, when I realized I was dissociated, all of that come tumbling down because um, I didn't have a firm foundation of spiritual anything because the figures involved had deceived, had been deceptive. My mum wasn't firm because she lost the plot of everything that happened. Our connection's gone a bit funny again. And my mum went, um, you know, I say lost plot, she's the natural result of terrible trauma as well. So it's not losing, being quite stable and trying to hang on within it all. So, um, yes, and one of love, hate, and peace, and it wasn't that. But that's the false religion. There's a false religion, and I think it's on our doorstep at the minute, and it's about to come, and it's going to make us decide. And how do you tell the difference between a false angel and a real angel when they've appeared as a good? How do you tell the difference with a child abuser who's, I work for a charity and I'm the most charitable thing, and yet they're doing that? And it is such the hardest thing is we're so easily led by goodness. We're so easily led by saving grandma and doing good stuff and all of this stuff. Um, it's more effective than the stick, the carrot is more effective than the stick because of that level of deception. So, and the problem was they've done both. They did both. That was the difficult within my life because I was having terrible physical experiences and results and mental results of horrific stuff that I could face in everyday life. I had no, my front part had no connection to what was causing the splits in my psyche. Why I still have a 5-year-old part.
So on your healing journey, what has worked for you? You mentioned a couple things that you've done, but what's been really helpful for you? I know therapy has been one thing. How have you sort of been able to manage coexisting with having a system? Because that had to have been really shocking, realizing you have parts and that they're all different. What has really worked for you to get to where you're at today?
I've had about 10 years, 2008, I first started realizing, and like nearly 10 years of therapy, 9 years, in the sense of pursuing help. One of the greatest things was what I did work with Darlene. We met emerging from broken, spotting lies, getting emotional intelligence. That was a great help. So I didn't have any. And we're fielding huge emotions, like each part has a different emotion. And some parts are like disabled in the sense of what you would get if you had a really starving child, or a child that's been left in the cold, or a child that's been beaten. You have these parts that come up having had this programming, and they're still fresh. So they'll come up now, like if I'm triggered by something and influence my front part. So I'll suddenly find myself going really struggling because of heightened anxiety, to the point of panic, and just that kind of level of distress. Um, and then I'd have to figure out why. So when I first realized it's associated, I'd be like, oh, I've switched 3 weeks after I'd switched. So I would switch to a little part. I realized 3 weeks later. So now I can switch, and within a second, I've known I've switched little to big. Like in this interview, I've only gone a tiny little bit, little at times, but not fully because I'm kind of trying to hold it together. But so at first it was really obvious the little big split, and then that still took weeks, and then over a couple of years it got to where I could see it instantly happening. Now it happens occasionally, I don't notice, and people I know will point that out to me. You've split, you've switched, something's triggered you. What is it? What have you seen? And so now I'm recognizing more the triggers, which actually gives me more context for the memories for what happened when I was younger, because I couldn't connect that. I'm only just starting to piece those exactly together in the triggers now. You get more body memories come up first. I don't know if that's the same for everybody else, but I get like really big body memories. So on a healing front, emotional intelligence, and then I would help everybody and never say no to people and just be walked over, and be exhausted all the time because I didn't have any boundaries. It's pretty common for life, but no boundaries and no sense of self. So when I first got to my school and I had that kind of really didn't know feeling thing, not in an autistic way, I knew when I was very small. Like my good grandma, really kind, prayed to Jesus every night, solid, best grandma you could have. And she's kind of my benchmark for, okay, I'd like to be like that, holding on to something real and right. Um, yeah, so boundaries and getting a sense of self. You don't know what you prefer when you're dissociated. You don't have preferences because you don't have a sense of how self that likes this or likes that. When I look back on the things I liked stones, which are massive programming tool. I like stones, like going around looking at rocks on the floor. It's like a really big thing that comes up with programming. Um, I find it really funny. I'm not the only one. I'm pretty sure Nathan talks about finding a rock and it being amazing and looking at rocks. And I was like, that's me. I just had collections of rocks everywhere. Um, but it relates to the gem stuff, doesn't it? Ties directly to that. Um, so your preferences, like me being a survival instructor, well, that relates to Delta programming and the soldier stuff. It slots in with that. All the Native American survival spiritual stuff relate to that. All the adventure stuff related to that. The things that I did physically in my outside life related to stuff that they wanted me to do. So when I did abseiling or climbing, or that was sometimes used in some of the stuff they wanted me to do, not that I wanted. So my preferences, I'm like, I like outdoor stuff, or I'm mountaineer. Yes, I like doing stuff. I love being outdoors, but there's another side to it when you realize that it's for a purpose. If their purpose is you to climb in and have to learn how to do it for a purpose, but you think it's what you want to do. I I think it's quite interesting. I'd like to know what I'd really like to do, because it's very much been messed with in my psyche hugely. Um, so yeah, so learning boundaries. When I first said no to toxic people, which was 2013, 14, I had this big burnout. No to toxic people. Oh my God, that was amazing, because suddenly I only met, or didn't only meet, but I could tell the difference between people with integrity and who don't change over time, who's, the proof's in the pudding of what someone's like, whether they're good or not. And it needs time. You have to test people over time. So it's like learning proper discernment. And it's the same on the spiritual battlefield, because you have just as equal problems spiritually as you do physically, as mirrored that. Yeah, so boundaries, preference, finding out what I like. Um, And then obviously when I put my first boundary up, it was like no toxic people, and it kind of went no people, right? Because you can't tell at first, but that's not a bad place to be, but not forever. And now it's like, is this person all right? Were these people that were flattering with me all right? No, they were trying to get information. They were all flattering and charming to get information and data and whatever else they wanted to find out. I like them, but it doesn't mean that they were being right by me. There was a level to see whether they knew it or not, because not all of them do know. Yeah, so I'm still dissociating. I still switch daily. Within seconds, in a minute, I could go big, little, big, little, big, little, really fast. Um, I'm still getting memories back. I I know some things that I don't know I could talk about them yet, but I will talk about them in the future. But yeah,
So
hit
what
them up.
made you want to go public? So you remember, I mean, you could have easily just kept your story to yourself and kept doing sort of an internal investigation and not expressing it. What made you want to actually share your story on a platform like this?
It's like carrying loads of heavy suitcases around all the time, full up with stuff. Like, because you've got the Masonic hierarchy running the world, visible in our architecture, in all sorts of jobs. This brotherhood's backing each other in business, in the world, and what their overarching purpose is, and the Satanic side of it, and the hidden research side of it. And then all the fallout is coming on individuals that you see who struggle in society, when they're homeless or having problems, and they're framed as this or that. And I've been navigating that whole thing myself, not to mention what's happened the last few years, where so many people have been lied to one way or another on such a scale. Um, and I I felt like I have to get these details out, that I do know, that picture that I've pieced together. It doesn't matter the fuzzy bits, it doesn't matter the bits that I still can't quite verbalize, um, because that was my environment growing up. That was my experience. These were people around me, and these were the things that went on that haven't been spoken about, whether it's the testing on the kids at school, whether it's a Masonic mural, a hospital with a demon head on it. These are things that you should ask questions. Why? Or why is that like that? A children's hospital shouldn't have a demon on it. These contradictions in spiritual terms. With what we're all getting sold a lot of. When you see it on repeat, when you see a slogan on repeat, that's programming. It doesn't matter if it's a really positive thing. It's still someone else is trying to influence you, us, to think or behave a certain way. It's not us choosing what we want to do with our freedom, with our life, or as people should be free on the planet. It's being molded, and so I suppose in trying to navigate the muddle myself with my own dissociation, my own physical overcoming, and my own spiritual overcoming. I wanted to get all these details out about these people that were involved that weren't not who they said they were. You know, they said, we are this, we are a Christian, or we are this, and they weren't. They were other things. They weren't doing the jobs they're supposed to do. And, I've had to navigate tremendous difficult times, whether stress or physical, um, psychic and spiritual from this journey. I didn't want to call up a Sumerian spirit in 2021. That only happened because they wanted that to happen. And I think that's, that is a satanic battle plan, isn't it? And it's that what isn't there, it's not a better weapon than just to talk about it, just to say it. I get to put all these suitcases down and not care about it anymore and not worry about Masonic symbolism and go off and want to become a thatcher and thatch cottages and make ancient places that are pretty and just do something like that. I like growing food. I like doing stuff like that. I don't want to be whatever the purpose was for all of that. Whether it's wider society messing with us on the internet or the TV, wanting us to buy certain food or advertising or jabbing ourselves or something. I kind of want to choose myself and I extricate myself from all of that pressure and both the internal pressure they put there and the external pressure. It's hard, isn't it? And for other people, it's overwhelming when you talk about people involved in these circles. It was terrifying for me. I've had tears and outbursts and everything all week because of just coming to this point of talking about it. Because it's these people that own all the technology, all the military, all the banking, all the power in the world, the satanic Tibetan. I've got my voice. I've got it. I think I've had, different times, different spiritual experiences in a Christian sense too. Laying on of hands I've had spiritually in churches and spiritual places that was different. They didn't come into me like my mum experienced with channeling. They laid hands from outside of myself. And that's very Christian. I didn't know that till I read the Bible and read about laying on of hands. But, there's a difference in the spiritual world. When I said I saw a demon come into me in a vision, I went, Jesus Christ, because he picked someone up and ate this demon, this like bull-headed, fierce and scary demon, picked someone up and ate them. And I was next, and I was like, Jesus Christ, and he disappeared completely. And I realized that name had power in that kingdom. Yeah, but I wasn't Christian when I did that. I was Buddhist, going, this is really mad. And so these big spiritual experiences happen to us, and we're all being tested, I think, in this time massively. I mean, it's depressing out there. I've got people I'm losing at the minute, and friends that are going down with problems after the jab, and it really is a mind control to get through if you're on one side or the other side or whatever box you want to sit in. It's really hard to get out to some place where you can be. I'm just going to be a nice person, be a good person, be fine. And keep it simple, because the minute you get into labels, it crosses into political territory. So I try staying well out of political territory because that is their game. That's what they're all over. That is the thing. And I also think there's hope. I mean, the Bible talks about people that are last and first, people that have done the worst things. If they turn around now and say, I'm sorry for what I've done, I don't want to go down that dark route, I want to come back, then there's a chance for that person to turn around. And I think there's a lot of people in that place that need to find the courage to speak out, who are in these circles, who are in the Masonic tradition. I mean, do you cast the first stone and label everybody as that's it, damned forever? Or do you say there's this opportunity, and the Christian thing is there's this opportunity to come out of it? And it's really hard. It's weird hearing myself say that because I have hated them. I've been like that double speak, that deception, that wielding symbolism and the power of life over death over all of us everywhere is sorry, the dog's gone off, someone's whistling. Um, wielding the power of life and death over us in those circles of the brotherhood and Masonic lodges in all different roles. This is what they've done with their doctors or surgeons. It's without our consent and without our knowledge. They've only just let us learn to read the last 100 years. So, um, that's really how long they had to read in 2,000 years, and now there you go. You can read now, but you can only read this. Read this stuff. So we want you to read. Don't read this stuff. Yeah, so I want to put all those suitcases of stuff down. I want to leave all of that stuff behind so I can get it out myself and hopefully help other people recognize and choose and get it out of themselves too.
Well, one thing that I want to say is that this little girl is so proud of you for doing this today, and she is so thankful that you gave her a voice because nobody else did. And I'm proud of you, and we're all proud of you. And I really appreciate you sharing all these really vulnerable times in your life, making me emotional. I know that this is like nobody wants to come forward and talk about these hard times, and I look at you and others and I just think like how courageous you are to like be able to put aside those fears and the doubts and the insecurities and the shame and all that comes with abuse, and to say, my story is going to help somebody, so I'm going to share it anyways. It really takes a hero to do that. And these stories really do help. I think we've lost touch with that part in society of how going through hard times with supportive people is actually very healing. A lot of times people go through hard times with abusive people. But if you take that trauma out of that abusive situation and share it with safe people, it's very healing and it makes people feel less alone. And like you said, it can make us feel lighter to just get it off of our chest and to know that, to put that shame back where it belongs to the other person, to not carry that anymore and to be ashamed of it. Because you never asked for that as a child. That wasn't, you deserved so much better as a little child, and you didn't have people that protected you in the way that you deserved. But you're now giving the opportunity to other parents and to survivors to say, it's never too late. You can become a better person. You can heal your own inner child. You can heal yourself. Even if you're not an extreme trauma survivor, we all have trauma, and being able to disarm ourselves and to heal that is a beautiful gift to give the world. So I just want to thank you with all my heart for coming on here and for sharing these photos and for sharing these parts of your life. I know it's going to help a lot of people on the other side of the screen. And I hope that there's people that come forward and, have their own puzzle pieces validated because of you. So thank you so much for coming on and for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate being able to talk, and I hope it does help. I do.
Was there anything else from your story, past, present, anything that you wanted to share before we start wrapping up that we didn't get to talk about?
I suppose I don't want to say it's it seems a bit pessimistic. I'm dealing with dissociation still. I've had quite a lot of years of trying to deal with it, and I'm still dealing with that. But I have um I have pulled back some power in the sense of more co-consciousness, deciding things. And I did all the way through when I was younger. I didn't do the prescribed route. I failed in the sense of dropping out, or I thought things were failures and they weren't. Looking back, they were not doing what they wanted. And so I think it's turning some of the things that we think are bad into something good. And I think there is another option outside of all of the things that we're being told, that it's very simple and very good. And I don't think it has to be so complicated as, when some things appear complicated or confusing, I think. Because I have to work on the level of my smallest parts. They were like 5 and 3 and traumatized, and I have to work on their level, and they don't understand political stuff or medical stuff or, whatever you're fielding. Um, yeah, you have to work on that level. And it's the same in wider society. People are walking around and they are little boys and little girls and they're running the country, right? They're running the police, they're running, but they are like the traumatized kid. And they can't, I mean, people look like they're messing up and just totally incapable because then they're not. They've got these different disparate parts that are struggling. And so I think it's really, we need to identify that and have that help. Show people out that are victims and give people out that want an out of that world. Um, and, if they come forward and they are turning over a new leaf and they reveal what they've done or been involved in, be like, that's okay, don't do it again. You're like, this is the turning point, isn't it? Really, the turning point. Um, and I want justice more than anything else. I want to see people have consequence that haven't, so that I'm not carrying the shame around every day. You say, am I in trouble? Have I done something wrong? What's why am I in trouble? And they constantly every day have to be, you're not, you haven't done anything wrong. You're not in trouble. There's other people that did this stuff every day. So if I can do it every day, we can do it as a society, I think. Yeah,
Thank you
that's
so much for those words of hope. That's beautiful. And it's amazing how far you've come. It's actually just it blows my mind every time I hear these stories to see where somebody was and where they're at now, and you're a true testament as to what years of healing can do, what patience can do, never giving up hope, continuing on despite, anything that tries to become a barrier or a challenge in front of you. And, I look forward to you continuing this mission, to speaking up, and I ask everybody to pray over you and to pray that you get your memories back in a really safe and comforting way where you can heal without the overwhelm of those flashbacks. And, that you continue to have more and more puzzle pieces to your story that you can fill in for your own sake. And then also that you come forth and continue to share what you remember and what you put together because it'll help other people. So
you're
thank you so much for coming on here, Lou, and for sharing.
welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
And since we are sort of being anonymous, what I'll do is if anybody wants to get in touch with you, if it's okay, I have my email in the show notes. So
Mhm.
if anybody wants to get in touch with Lou, you can go ahead and email me and then I'll go ahead and forward that to Lou. That way you
Yeah,
guys can meet.
yeah,
And she can decide if it's a good fit for her to reach out. So if you guys want to get in contact, I have both of my emails in the show notes, so feel free to send me an email, and then perhaps at a later date, if you're on social media or anything like that, we can share that with people and they can connect with you there. Does that
yeah.
work?
Okay, so they can find me via that route as well. Maybe we can post that as a link or something.
What was that?
I'm on Twitter as well, so we could use that as a route as well. So you could
Oh,
put my
do you want
link
to
up.
you want to
Yeah,
share that?
yeah, just share that. That'd be fine.
Okay. Do you want to say what your handle is, or do you want me to just put it in the notes and people can go look?
Yes, put it in the notes. That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. So I will have Lou's Twitter in the show notes also, so you guys can connect with her that way. And I encourage you guys to. That's one of the easiest simplest and most affordable ways that we can support survivors is just simply following them on social media. Just go follow. The enemy hates whenever we have eyes on these warriors and whenever they have an army behind them. So I encourage you guys to go follow and reach out to her. That's very generous of her to give us that information. You guys can also still email me and I'll pass that on to her also if you'd rather do it that route, if you're not on Twitter. So I will have all that in the show notes. I'll have all my information as well. I encourage you guys to just try to connect on as many platforms as you can. I am back on YouTube, but it's a very unstable platform. So I don't know. There might be a time eventually where I get kicked off again. So if you guys want to keep in touch, just follow as many places as you can. That way we're sort of combating the censorship deal together. So I'll have all that in the show notes. I will have Lou's information. I really am grateful for all of you guys. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for listening. God bless you, and we will see you next time.